The towering glass walls of Calloway Enterprises reflected the New York skyline, a fortress built by Ethan Calloway's ambition. At 30, he was a man of influence. Sharp suits, sharper blue eyes, and a heart sealed behind cold indifference. Inside the boardroom, murmurs of concern floated. The upcoming merger with Hartman Global required Ethan to appear stable, a man with more than wealth, a man with a family. His jaw clenched. Love, marriage, those were words that belonged to fairy tales. Not his world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. But appearances mattered. Reluctantly, Ethan made a decision he thought would cost him nothing: a contract marriage. Across town, Lila Monroe sat in a modest apartment, the weight of unpaid bills and her mother's hospital fees crushing her spirit. Her once bright eyes had dulled under the strain of survival. Every job she juggled barely covered groceries, let alone the mounting medical expenses. She needed a miracle, or a deal with the devil. An agency's message blinked on her cracked phone screen. Lucrative arrangement. Discreet. 1-year marriage contract. It sounded insane. But desperation leaves little room for dignity. The next day she walked into Ethan's office, her nerves hidden behind a brave smile. He barely looked at her, skimming the contract like it was another business acquisition. No love, no attachment, no expectations. Just 1 year of public appearances, photo ops, and cold scripted moments. His voice was emotionless, his words sharp. "If you're hoping for romance, Miss Monroe, this isn't it," Ethan warned, his blue eyes glinting like ice. Lila's throat tightened. She should have walked away. But then she remembered her mother's tired face and trembling hands. "I'll do it," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm inside. She signed the papers with trembling fingers, never daring to imagine that this man, this cold, distant stranger, was the very boy who once held her hand in a sun-drenched field, promising to marry her one day. Neither recognized the other. Not yet. As Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, Lila felt a strange, haunting pull in her chest, like a ghost brushing past her heart. Something about his touch, his scent, felt familiar, but she buried the thought, telling herself it was just nerves. "Welcome to our arrangement, Mrs. Calloway," Ethan said, his lips curling into a rehearsed smile. And just like that, two souls bound by fate, grief, and forgotten love entered a deal that would unravel everything they thought they knew. The ink dried, but destiny had only begun to write its story. Lila stood in the cold, expansive hallway of Ethan's penthouse, her fingers brushing the smooth marble. The luxury around her felt empty, as though it wasn't meant for her. Ethan had made it clear from day one. This was a contract, nothing more. The rules were simple: no affection, no personal questions, and always maintain appearances. Their first week together had been suffocating. At work, he barely acknowledged her. When they appeared in public, their smiles were rehearsed, their gestures stiff. Ethan kept his distance, his eyes never lingering on hers. It was as though she was just a piece of furniture, something to display, not someone to connect with. But despite the coldness, something inside Lila stirred. She could feel it, a strange sense of familiarity in his presence. Ethan's voice, the way he moved, it was all so reminiscent of someone she once knew, someone she thought she'd lost forever. Her heart beat faster when he spoke her name, though she quickly dismissed it as a trick of her mind. At night, in the silence of the luxurious bed, Lila would curl up beneath the crisp sheets, her mind racing. What was it about him? Why did his eyes seem to hold a story she couldn't quite grasp? It was maddening, this feeling of connection to a man who didn't even acknowledge her as more than a business partner. On the other hand, Ethan found himself noticing her more and more. At the charity event, he watched how she interacted with the guests, how her smile lit up the room despite the coldness between them. Her kindness stood out like a beacon in his cold world. Every time she laughed, a warmth he couldn't place stirred deep within him. He didn't want to feel it, this strange pull toward her. He was supposed to keep it professional, keep his emotions locked away. But Lila's presence was slowly breaking through the walls he'd built. Her voice, her laughter, even the way she spoke to strangers. It was a stark contrast to the world he inhabited. Ethan couldn't explain it. Why did he care about her, even if only for a fleeting moment? He pushed the thoughts aside, telling himself it was nothing. After all, this was just a business arrangement. But when Lila looked at him, just for a second, with that fleeting recognition in her eyes, it shook him. She couldn't know, could she? The night air was thick with anticipation as the Calloway Enterprises gala came to a close. The ballroom buzzed with conversation, laughter, and clinking glasses. Ethan stood at the edge of the crowd, his usual confident demeanor on display. But Lila, in the midst of the chaos, caught his attention with a laugh, light and free, like it belonged to someone he once knew. Suddenly, the sky darkened and the first raindrops fell, quickly turning into a torrential downpour. The event organizers scrambled, but the rain was relentless. Guests fled for cover, and Ethan found himself pulling Lila toward the nearest exit. She stumbled behind him, her heels clicking against the slick pavement, laughing at the absurdity of the situation. Drenched, hair sticking to her face, Lila couldn't contain her amusement. The sound of her laughter, that soft, melodic sound, stirred something deep within him. As they ducked into a nearby awning, Ethan glanced over at her, his chest tightening, her eyes, her smile. For a brief moment, something flickered in his mind, something distant but all too familiar, a memory from his childhood. He watched her face as the rain pelted the world around them, and a vivid flash of a little girl with the same laugh, the same bright eyes, appeared before him. Lila. His heart thudded in his chest as his mind struggled to piece it all together. Number it couldn't be. His first and only love, a girl he had lost in a tragic accident all those years ago, was standing before him. But she was different now. Older, more beautiful, and yet it was her. Ethan shook his head, refusing to acknowledge the possibility. It couldn't be her. He had buried that part of his life long ago. The pain of loss, the wounds that had never healed. This woman was a stranger, nothing more. His gaze hardened as he looked away, forcing the memory back into the dark recesses of his mind. But Lila, oblivious to his internal turmoil, stared at him, her heart beating faster. There was something about him, his eyes, the set of his jaw, that tugged at her. She knew him. This wasn't just a business partnership. She had known him before. But how? She couldn't explain it. As the rain continued to pour, she stood there, drenched, lost in the unspoken connection that hummed between them. A pull that felt like destiny, a pull that she couldn't ignore, no matter how hard she tried. Weeks passed, and the icy distance between Ethan and Lila began to thin, not because of any grand gesture, but through the small, unexpected moments that chipped away at the walls they'd built. One morning, after another sleepless night filled with back-to-back meetings and endless paperwork, Ethan stumbled into his kitchen, eyes heavy with exhaustion. He froze when he saw her. Lila standing by the counter, a warm mug of coffee in hand. A plate of homemade pancakes sat beside it, a soft smile on her face. "I thought you might need this," she said, her voice gentle, kind. Ethan wasn't used to kindness. He was used to people doing things for him because they had to. But Lila? She did it because she cared. He found himself staring at her, at a loss for words, feeling something stir within him, a feeling he couldn't quite name. The next day, an executive at the company made a rude comment about one of Ethan's recent decisions. He was condescending, dismissive, a man who believed his power could crush anyone in his path. But Lila, standing just behind Ethan, stepped forward without hesitation. "That's enough," she said firmly, her eyes narrowing with quiet authority. The room fell silent. Ethan watched in awe as Lila stood her ground, her voice steady and unyielding. She wasn't intimidated. The executive backed down immediately. It was small, but Ethan's respect for her grew in that moment. She had courage, a strength he hadn't expected from someone who had entered his life under such cold terms. But the real turning point came a week later, when Ethan's grandmother, who had been in and out of the hospital, fell ill again. Ethan was buried in work, his emotions tangled in a mess of guilt and helplessness. But Lila, without being asked, spent hours at her side, holding her hand and offering comfort. When Ethan finally visited the hospital, His grandmother had nothing but praise for Lila. "You have a good heart, dear," she said, her frail voice warm and sincere. "Take care of him." Ethan was stunned. Lila was winning hearts, not just his grandmother's, but those of everyone she came in contact with. There was a tenderness in her, a natural grace that made people feel seen and cared for, and it was impossible not to notice. At night, when they sat in silence, working side by side, Ethan found himself smiling for the first time in months, genuinely, without thinking about it. Sometimes even laughing at something she said, at the way she would tease him, lightening the tension in the room. But Lila too felt the shift. Her feelings, once carefully guarded, now began to slip. She found herself looking at him in a new way. Ethan was no longer just the cold CEO. He was someone with layers, with flaws, someone who made mistakes but tried to be better. She had sworn not to fall for him. It was a contract. No love, no attachment. But the line between duty and desire began to blur. She often caught herself wondering if it was foolish to hope for something more than what they had. A fleeting moment of happiness, a touch of warmth, a possibility of love. But was it too dangerous? Was it worth the risk? And Ethan, unaware of the feelings that had begun to take root within him, was locked in a battle of his own. Guilt clouded his mind. Was he starting to feel more than he should? He couldn't afford to. This wasn't supposed to be a real relationship. But each smile she gave him, each kind gesture, made him question everything. Was this really just a contract? It was an unplanned visit to the Calloway family estate, a sprawling mansion nestled on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by lush forests and sprawling gardens. The estate, with its rich history and old-world charm, was a reminder of the Calloway legacy, a world Ethan had grown up in, but one that felt more like a prison than a home. Lila, not one to be intimidated by grandeur, wandered the grounds while Ethan was caught up with family business. She explored the familiar rooms, admiring the antique furniture and heirlooms that lined the halls. But it was the garden that beckoned her most, an ancient oak tree standing proudly in the distance. Drawn to it, she found herself at the base of a tree house, its wooden beams weathered by years of neglect, but still standing strong. Intrigued, she climbed the ladder, the wood creaking under her weight. Inside, she found a quiet, almost sacred space, untouched by time. A small wooden box sat in the corner, covered in dust, waiting to be discovered. Her hands trembled as she opened the box, the contents inside delicate and precious. A necklace, a simple silver chain with a small pendant shaped like a heart attached to it. But what caught her attention were the initials EC plus LM carved on the inside of the box. Her heart stopped. Ethan Calloway, Lila Monroe. The shock hit her like a wave, crashing over her. The memories flooded back in an instant. She was no longer just the woman married to him in a contract. She was the girl who had fallen in love with him all those years ago. The girl who had shared dreams of a future together. He had promised her, promised to marry her before life tore them apart with that tragic accident that shattered everything. Tears welled up in Lila's eyes as she clutched the necklace, her fingers tracing the pendant, trying to remember the sound of Ethan's voice, the warmth of his hand in hers. It had all felt like a distant dream. But here, in this old treehouse, the truth was undeniable. Ethan was the boy she had loved, but fear gripped her heart. What if he didn't remember? What if he saw this as a trick, a manipulation? She couldn't risk it. She couldn't risk him thinking she had planned this, that she had orchestrated their meeting. No, she couldn't tell him. Lila made a silent vow to herself. She would wait. Wait for him to remember on his own. But with each passing day, the weight of that unspoken truth grew heavier in her chest. She prayed with all her heart that Ethan would one day see the truth, that they were more than just two strangers brought together by a contract. It was a night of high society, the kind where power and influence mingled effortlessly, where every move was scrutinized and every whisper held weight. Ethan and Lila attended a charity gala, the glittering event serving as a delicate backdrop for the high-stakes merger he was trying to secure. But things were about to take a turn that neither of them could have predicted. Sienna Blake, a woman with flawless beauty and a sharp mind to match, had always been Ethan's ex-girlfriend, and now she was something far more dangerous. She was also his business rival, and though Ethan had ended their romantic relationship years ago, Sienna had never fully relinquished her hold on him. She still wanted him, and the idea of Lila, a woman with no true place in Ethan's world, threatened everything Sienna had fought to control. Sienna watched from across the room as Ethan and Lila conversed, the connection between them undeniable. A fire ignited in her chest. Lila Monroe, this woman who had entered Ethan's life as a mere contractual partner, had something that Sienna never would: genuine affection. And Sienna wasn't about to let that slide. Whispers spread like wildfire when Sienna made her move. During the charity auction, she approached Lila with an innocent-looking question, one that soon escalated into an argument. The guests around them watched in hushed silence as Sienna accused Lila of using Ethan for his wealth, claiming that Lila was only after his money and power. The scene was perfectly orchestrated, every word a calculated strike. It wasn't long before cameras snapped and reporters scrambled to cover the scandal. The media pounced on the story, and soon it became headline news. Lila, who had always been gracious and kind, was painted as nothing more than a gold digger, a woman who had used a contract to trap Ethan in a marriage that was always meant to be a facade. For a moment, Ethan stood frozen, torn between two worlds. His mind screamed at him to protect the merger, to keep his public image intact, to avoid any further drama that could harm the business. But in the deep pit of his stomach, another emotion stirred. Something stronger than obligation, something more powerful than the corporate world he had carefully built. He turned to Lila, his eyes searching her face for the truth, and in that instant, he saw it: the hurt in her eyes, the confusion, the pain of being dragged into something she had never asked for. Without hesitation, Ethan made his choice. He walked toward Sienna, who stood smugly, believing her plan had worked, and then, without a second thought, he turned to the nearest microphone. The cameras clicked as he took a deep breath, his voice steady but filled with the weight of his words. "She's not just my wife," he declared, his eyes locking with Lila's. "She's a woman of integrity, and I'll stand by her, no matter what." The media gasped, and the room fell into an uneasy silence. The weight of his statement sent shockwaves through the crowd. Ethan had publicly defended Lila, shattering the cold, calculated image he had always portrayed, all for her. Sienna's face twisted in disbelief as Ethan's words hung in the air. The press went wild and the room buzzed with hushed conversations. But for Ethan, there was no going back. He had shattered his own rules, ignoring the voices that told him to protect his empire at all costs. For the first time, his heart had won. Lila's eyes widened, the unexpected warmth of his words breaking through her own defenses. She had no idea how to react. The man who had treated her with indifference now stood before the world, openly declaring his loyalty to her. The damage was done, though. Sienna, furious and humiliated, tried to salvage her reputation, but the media had already turned their focus to Ethan's bold declaration. The board, too, was left speechless, unsure how to react. The fragile arrangement between Ethan and Lila had just taken on a new, deeper meaning. The gala was a blur to Ethan. The flashing cameras, the murmurs of the crowd, and Sienna's cold fury all seemed to fade into the background. It wasn't the event that consumed him now. It was Lila, the woman who had quietly stepped into his life, only to shatter the walls he had built around his heart. That night, after the chaos had settled, Ethan returned home, his mind a storm of confusion. The press was already hounding him with questions, and the board had made it clear that they were not pleased with his public defense of Lila. But none of that mattered to him in that moment. What gnawed at him was a feeling he could not ignore. He sat in the study, his hands trembling slightly as he sifted through his keepsake box, a relic from his childhood that he rarely opened. His fingers brushed against old trinkets and mementos, reminders of a lifelong past. But then, buried under layers of forgotten memories, his hand closed around something familiar. It was the necklace, the silver heart pendant, delicate and worn with age, but unmistakably the one Lila had given him all those years ago. Lila. His heart pounded in his chest as memories came rushing back. Flashes of a young girl with sparkling eyes, a sweet, innocent love, promises of forever whispered in the dark of night. She had been his first love, the one person he had trusted completely before life had torn them apart. He couldn't breathe. He stumbled to his feet, his mind reeling, the pieces finally clicking into place. The woman standing by his side, the one he had married in a contract, was the same girl he had loved as a child. The girl who had vanished from his life, leaving only a broken heart and unanswered questions. He had found her again. The realization struck like a thunderclap. The truth, long buried, was now impossible to deny. Lila Monroe was his childhood Lila. Without a second thought, Ethan stormed down the hallway, heading straight for Lila's room. His heart raced as he knocked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Lila!" he called, desperation seeping into his tone. "We need to talk." When she opened the door, her eyes were swollen from crying, and Ethan felt his chest tighten at the sight. He couldn't hold back any longer. "I know," he said, voice low but filled with urgency. "I know who you are." Lila's face paled as she took a step back, her hands trembling. "Ethan, please. I didn't want you to find out like this." Ethan's breath hitched. "You're her, aren't you? You're the girl who gave me this," he said, holding up the necklace. "Lila, my Lila, the one I've been searching for all these years." Tears welled up in Lila's eyes, and in a voice barely above a whisper, she nodded. "I didn't know how to tell you. I never wanted to lie to you, but I didn't know how else to come back into your life. After everything that happened, I couldn't risk you thinking it was a coincidence." Ethan's knees nearly gave way as the weight of it all hit him. The years of pain, the years of emptiness, had all led to this moment. He collapsed into a chair, his hand on his face, overwhelmed by the storm of emotions crashing over him. "How?" he asked, his voice thick with disbelief. "How could we end up here? After everything we went through, everything we lost? How could fate bring us back together like this?" Lila slowly walked toward him, kneeling in front of him. "I don't know, Ethan, but all I know is that I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped loving you, and I never wanted to hurt you." Ethan's heart shattered as he looked into her eyes. Eyes that were so familiar, yet filled with a pain he hadn't expected. In that moment, the years of anger, the years of distance, all seemed so insignificant. He reached out, cupping her face gently in his hands. "I don't know what to do with all of this," he whispered, his voice cracking. "But what I do know is that I never stopped loving you either." Lila's tears fell freely now, but she smiled through them, a smile full of both sorrow and hope. "Then let's make it right, together." And in that moment, Ethan knew that they had found each other once more, against impossible odds. A love rekindled, a bond unbroken, no matter how much time had passed. The weight of the contract had always hung over them like a shadow, a cold, detached promise, a binding agreement that had kept them at arm's length from the truth. But now in the stillness of their shared vulnerability, Ethan and Lila knew they were finally free. There were no more rules, no more cold boundaries between them. What had begun as a business arrangement, as a calculated plan for appearances, had slowly transformed into something real, something far more powerful than either of them had expected. Ethan's hand reached for Lila's, the touch tender, full of both awe and longing. He had spent so many years building walls around his heart, convinced that his empire needed him cold and indifferent. But now, as he looked at her, the woman who had always been by his side in one form or another, he realized that the greatest thing he had ever built was the love they had rekindled. Lila smiled softly, the warmth in her gaze making Ethan feel as though he had been awakened from a long, painful slumber. "You don't have to pretend anymore, Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "We've already crossed that line. There's no going back." He nodded, his heart swelling with emotions he couldn't always put into words. "I know, Lila. I never thought I'd get this back. I never thought I'd get you back." Tears of joy blurred her vision, but she wiped them away quickly, her fingers trembling with happiness. "I never wanted you to feel alone. I thought we had lost each other forever. But we didn't." Ethan pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her, holding her tight as if afraid she might disappear again. I don't want to ever let you go, Lila. You're everything I never knew I was missing. The confession hung in the air between them, raw, honest, and completely real. Ethan had spent so many years pretending that love didn't matter, that success and power were the only things worth chasing. But in Lila's arms, he understood now that love was the thing that gave everything else meaning. Lila rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It felt like home. It felt like finally being where she belonged. For so long, she had held on to the memories of their childhood, clinging to the hope that one day somehow they would find their way back to each other. And now, standing here in his embrace, she knew that dream had come true. I think, Ethan paused, his voice hushed with emotion. I think we should renew our vows, not as a business agreement, not as a contract, but as soulmates, as the people we were always meant to be. Lila pulled back slightly, searching his face for the truth in his words. The vulnerability in his eyes made her heart skip a beat. You want that? He smiled softly, his fingers brushing her cheek with a tenderness he hadn't shown anyone in years. Yes, Lila, I do. I want you, all of you. Not because I have to, but because I can't imagine my life without you. Tears welled up in her eyes once more, but this time they were tears of happiness. I love you, Ethan. I've always loved you. And as they stood there, holding each other close, it became clear that their love had never truly been lost. It had only been waiting, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the truth to be revealed. Over the following weeks, they let go of the past. The contract, the cold walls, the pretenses, they were all gone. Ethan and Lila allowed themselves to truly live together, free of obligations and filled only with love. They spent lazy mornings in bed, wrapped up in each other's warmth. They shared soft laughter over breakfast, a quiet joy that neither had ever experienced before. Their lives, once driven by ambition and appearances, had now been reshaped into something simpler, something far more precious. Their connection was the only thing that mattered now, and every touch, every kiss, felt like a promise. A promise that they would never again let go of the love they had found. And as they stood in front of their closest friends and family weeks later, exchanging vows that were real and full of hope, they knew they had both found something they never thought possible. A second chance at love, a love that had been written in the stars long before they even knew it. With a kiss that sealed their promises, Ethan and Lila knew their story was only just beginning. Together they would create a future where love and trust were no longer just dreams, but a reality they would cherish for the rest of their lives. Just when Ethan and Lila believed they had weathered every storm, a new one came crashing into their lives. It started with an unexpected scandal. Sienna Blake, Ethan's glamorous ex-girlfriend and rival, had carefully orchestrated a scheme that would destroy everything they had fought for. The media exploded with a story that shook their world. Lila Monroe, the wife of billionaire CEO Ethan Calloway, exposed in a fake pregnancy scandal. The accusations were wild, alleging that Lila had faked a pregnancy to trap Ethan into marriage. Sienna, determined to win Ethan back and ruin Lila's reputation, had forged medical records and manipulated photos to support her lies. The press swarmed them, eager to tear down Lila's reputation, questioning her every move. Ethan, always calculated and composed, now found himself spiraling, not just fighting to protect his company, but the woman he loved. He had never imagined that Sienna and her jealousy would sink to such depths. Lila, devastated by the accusations, found herself under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. The press relentlessly hounded her, questioning her every decision and casting doubt on her integrity. Ethan's company began to feel the ripple effect of the scandal as investors hesitated and the media painted them as a couple built on lies. But Lila, despite the heartache, stood firm. She would not let Sienna's malicious actions destroy the love she had for Ethan. She refused to let the lies win. With Ethan by her side, she knew they could face anything. Together. But she feared the damage was already done. Ethan was torn. His past, his love for Lila, and his desire to protect her clashed with the pressure of the merger. He knew he had to make a choice: the merger and his company's future, or the woman who had captured his heart. In an unexpected move, Ethan took to the media. His face, once a symbol of control, now showed emotion, the vulnerability he had long hidden. "This is a lie," Ethan stated firmly in a televised interview. "Lila and I are not perfect, but our love is real. We will not let anyone, no matter how powerful, tear us apart." His voice rang with sincerity, and for the first time, his emotions were laid bare. Lila, standing by his side, supported him without hesitation. "The truth will always come to light. No matter how hard they try to break us, we will not bend," she declared. Her voice trembled slightly, but her strength was undeniable. Their united front sent shockwaves through the media. The public, once uncertain, now saw the raw, unfiltered truth of their relationship. The power couple had been tested, and they had come out stronger. Together, they dug deep and uncovered Sienna's involvement in the scandal. It was revealed that she had forged documents, manipulated evidence, and even bribed key individuals to create the fake pregnancy story. With the truth finally in the open, Sienna was publicly exposed, her reputation shattered, and her cruel plot crumbled. The media quickly shifted its focus. Instead of seeing Lila as the villain, they now saw her as a woman who had been wronged. Lila's reputation was restored, and Ethan's loyalty to her and his willingness to fight for their love only cemented their place in the hearts of their fans. Sienna's plan had backfired. What she thought would tear them apart had only made them stronger. Ethan and Lila stood side by side, united against all odds, and the world finally saw the strength of their bond. Through the storm, they had proven that love was stronger than any lie, and that no matter what, they would always stand together. With every storm now behind them, Ethan and Lila stood stronger than ever, the world no longer an enemy, but a canvas for their shared dreams. The chaos had faded, and now the two of them were free to write the next chapter of their lives, a chapter that was solely theirs. Ethan had everything he could ever want: success, wealth, power. But there was one thing that had eluded him for years: a love that was pure and untainted by the world around him. And now, with Lila by his side, he had found it. After everything they had endured, Ethan knew the time had come to ask her the question that had always lingered in his heart. There were no contracts, no business deals, no stakes to protect. This was just him, vulnerable and open, asking for the one thing he had always wanted: her love without any conditions. He invited her to the family estate, a place that held so many memories, not just of their childhood, but of the journey they had traveled together. Beneath the very treehouse where they had once played as children, Ethan got down on one knee, his heart racing. The treehouse, now weathered by time, had witnessed the innocence of their early love, and Ethan wanted it to be the witness to their new beginning. "Lila," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we've been through so much, but all I want now is to build a future with you, a future filled with love, no contracts, no expectations, just us. Will you marry me? Not because we have to, but because we choose to." Tears welled up in Lila's eyes as she gazed at him, the man she had always loved, the one who had once slipped away, but had now returned to her heart in ways she never thought possible. This was the moment she had dreamed of for years, the chance to choose love, to choose him, without the weight of the world on their shoulders. "Yes, Ethan, I will marry you," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. "I've always loved you, and I will always choose you." They exchanged vows beneath the branches of the treehouse, surrounded by the quiet beauty of nature, and the only witness to their love was the silent sky above. The ceremony was intimate, simple, but perfect. There were no grand gestures or extravagant displays, just two people, deeply in love, promising to spend the rest of their lives together. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, Ethan and Lila knew that this was only the beginning of their forever. The love they had for each other had been tested by time, by distance, by the weight of the world, but it had only grown stronger. They had found each other once more, and this time they would never let go. Their story, one once lost to the winds of time, had come full circle. It was a love not defined by contracts or the business world, but by a choice to love, to fight for each other, and to never let go. They knew that some loves were simply meant to find their way back home, no matter how far they had to travel. Together, Ethan and Lila would build a life filled with laughter, quiet mornings, and unwavering love. A life that was theirs to cherish, a life that would last forever.